everyone. Welcome back to the Crypto Night Show. We are going to be covering an absolute fantastic topic today. Of course, we'll be looking at the shocking truth about China's Navy live fire in the Tasman Sea, and of course, Australia and New Zealand panic. As you guys know, I'm from New Zealand, so it is a direct impact on me in terms of the political ramifications, and yeah, pretty big deal. So we're going to get into all that. Hope you guys enjoy it. Now, many of you around the world may not even be familiar with this happening. We're also going to look how China is expanding into the Indo-Pacific, and particularly as far now as the Cook Islands, and of course a very controversial deal there being made there. This has big ramifications. China is on the imperialist move, and we're going to check out some of the things that are happening. And so, yeah, a very big deal there. Now, we know Trump, of course, is reorganizing world issues, trying to go to world peace, dealing with Russia, dealing with Europe, dealing with the Middle East, dealing with tariffs, trying to repeg the U.S. economy. Obviously, that impacts China. And of course, China, they're also trying to move its pieces on the chessboard as well, vis-a-vis Russia. And of course, also with international trade and its target for Taiwan, and also potentially breakout of the South China Seas and expand its reach into the Pacific. That would obviously come to threaten the United States, which is on the other side of the Pacific Ocean, which, if you didn't know, is about, I think, 6 moons sizes away from each other. So pretty big deal there. So we're going to get into it. Don't forget to get into the chat there. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe, like, share. And of course, if you want to join our Discord links in the video description. $5 to join up to that, pretty good value. And of course, if you want to join Strategy Club in there as well for crypto, then that's $35 a month. Join up today. Without further ado, let's get straight into it and cover this very exciting topic, the shocking truth about China's Navy's live fire in the Tasman Sea. Australia and New Zealand definitely panicking from that. This is a big deal to see China's ships this far down. So we're going to have a look at all that. All right, so at the moment, we've got obviously the Earth, and you guys would be around the world. So if you're in the United States, across the Pacific, that's all the way up here. And that is where the United States is, of course, Canada, United States, and South America, Mexico there. And of course, that is how far away this issue is. But is it that far away? Well, there's Hawaii, Honolulu there. That's one of the American states as well. And that's what the most westward state, right in the middle Pacific Ocean there. And of course, down further here, we've got the Pacific Islands, right? If you're not familiar with Pacific Islands, right down the bottom of the world, Samoa, Fiji, Tonga, Cook Islands, French Polynesia, New Caledonia, all in the house there. Solomon Islands up here as well. And then you get down to where I am in New Zealand, and you get obviously Australia, of course. Australia there, a huge ally with the United States, really big ally with the United States. Now, obviously, China is all the way up here. China is far away from home, very far. What the heck is it doing down there? That's the question. So here's China, and of course, China has had a lot of provocations here in this the South China Sea down the bottom here. This is where a lot of the issues have been with China. They're trying to expand, and because there's some very valuable minerals in there, and they've got some degree of historical claims that they want to make. Of course, many of them protest those from Vietnam to the Philippines. And of course, here is Taiwan, right? Taiwan sitting right there with the big China over here. Now, China, of course, has been wanting to get Taiwan back, sees it as a part of China. Taiwan, of course, wants to be independent and therefore is been resisting. Now, Taiwan, of course, is an economic miracle, particularly around semiconductor microchips, of course, which what Trump wants to get, right? Trump wants to get get that back into the US. A lot of manufacturing used to be in the United States, and Trump's trying to get that back as well. So it's going to be really interesting to see how that goes, because obviously China, if it takes Taiwan, will get the semiconductor industry as well. Taiwanese people, of course, want to be independent and free, and of course they live in a relatively free society compared to China, which is an authoritarian communist state, right? So it is a very, very big deal. Now, of course, many people, and I'm one of them, hold to the fact that China doesn't just want Taiwan, but actually would want to break out of the end of the Pacific there, because they want to be the number one power in the world, right? Take America's place. So that's going to be a very serious issue there. So we're going to scroll down all the way down, back down to Australia. So if you think about it, this flotilla from China, this naval force with 2 advanced fighting ships, 1 supply ship, and potentially a nuclear submarine, or a submarine at least, with the contingent is come all the way down to Australia here, all the way down. This miles away from home for what? For what? Well, obviously to intimidate, right? So obviously to intimidate, and they've done live fire here. They were up in the Coral Sea, originally seen up there, and then they came floating down into the Tasman Sea. Tasman Sea, for those who are not familiar, is between Australia and New Zealand. The seas can be extremely rough there, given the Antarctic is down the bottom here. So if you've not been down there, which most people haven't, I think there's only a couple of thousand people, most have been down there. This is very dangerous seas when the weather's very bad. Now, Tasman Sea, that's where the Chinese military Navy flotilla is, and they've been doing live fire drills at least twice that I'm aware of down here. And of course, that's caused great alarm to Australia and New Zealand. And of course, it's not just that they're allowed to navigate they've got freedom of the seas. They're allowed to navigate there. Of course, they've come very close to the Australian economic zone, just off the coast of Australia there. And, they're allowed to go in there peacefully. But of course, they have been doing live fire down here. What the heck for, So that is the controversy. And of course, it's very much potentially in reaction to the United States and Trump's positioning in the world. And of course, Australia being the big ally there. Intimidate the big ally and see how far you can push them, right? So that's kind of where we are at the moment. Now, Australia, of course, has a Labor government. They are very weak. They're weak internationally, but they're very good at authoritarianism on their own population. So they've got a bit of that's pretty much it where you get the Marxists in power. Now, New Zealand has a national party. They're socially conservative to some degree. They're economically conservative to some degree, but they're socially progressive, at least dominated by social progressives. So it's not too much different from Australia from that point of view. So we got that. They've also got very weak leadership. We got Prime Minister Luxon. He doesn't have a clue what he's doing. And of course, here we are in the Tasman Sea with these ships. So New Zealand and Australia both panicking at this event. It has been really a big deal there. So pretty crazy stuff. Let me just double check here on the YouTube here. I'm just going to do a double technical check. So that's kind of that's laying out the scene at the moment as well. So I hope you guys can see all that. It looks all right. Just double checking the technology there. So this is New Zealand and this is Australia, and the Chinese are down there with their military fleet. What the heck? What the heck? And of course, the only thing that protects Australia and New Zealand is the big ocean, generally speaking. So that is where we are at the moment. Now, we've got a bit of video clip we're going to play to summarize this, and then we're going to get into the detail about this big event.
The drama involving Chinese warships in the Tasman Sea has escalated with a second live firing drill this afternoon. It comes just a day after a similar incident in which passenger jets were forced to change course with little warning. Tonight, the opposition and security experts are calling for a stronger response from the federal government.
The Prime Minister on a pre-election campaign trail in must-win Tasmanian swing seats.
Nice to meet you, Maya.
But in waters east of the Apple Isle, Chinese ships in the Tasman threatening to upset the Pacific. This afternoon, the Chinese Navy, for the second day in a row, advising of live firing activity. New Zealand's Defence Minister confirming their Navy observed live rounds being fired from the Chinese ship's gun. Foreign Minister Penny Wong raising concerns over yesterday's live fire drill alert, meeting with her Chinese counterpart.
Our meeting today also enables us to discuss again our expectations around safe and professional military conduct.
I don't think we have a satisfactory answer from China as to the question of the notice.
Last week, a Chinese jet released flares just metres in front of an Australian surveillance plane. The same week, the Defence Department made public that they were monitoring 3 Chinese warships sailing in the Coral Sea. Those ships made their way down the east coast yesterday, forcing the diversion of passenger planes mid-flight after radio warnings live fire drills would be conducted in the Tasman Sea.
Mild and diplomatic rebukes by the Australian government whenever one of these incidents happen is not deterring the Chinese from doing it again and again and again.
I think what we've seen from the Prime Minister and his Defence Minister is a pattern of weakness over the last 2 years.
They are in international waters. They are completely within the bounds of international law.
Our own Prime Minister knocking back suggestions the government should impose any stronger rebukes like restrictions on trade.
You do know that most of the trade goes from here to there, not the other way around.
Tonight, new details of a deal struck between China and the Cook Islands to build more ports and ships, reinforcing that our biggest trading partner continues to be our biggest security challenge. Amanda Kopp, 9 News.
All right, so that last bit there about the Cook Islands, we're going to cover that issue as well, because that's China's expansionary behaviour. And this is even more alarming than potentially these ships firing away, so has longer repercussions. But that is where you saw the Australian Prime Minister, the New Zealand Prime Minister, both pretty relaxed about it, and of course telling people not to worry about it. But it is pretty unprecedented. So we're going to look at that. It's pretty crazy to see a Chinese flotilla. Now they did give some sort of notices that they were going to do live fire, but it was very short notice. And as you saw in that video recap there by 9 News, the civilian airplanes had to go around and detour there. Because of that. And these two Chinese warships in particular are very advanced. So that's pretty crazy. Now, we're going to go through, this is from the South China Sea. This is from the Chinese newspaper. So we're going to have a look at that. Where China's unprecedented naval drills in Tasman Sea signal to Australia and New Zealand. What is the signal there? What is it? And I said to you, it's clearly intimidation there in response to a partner of the United States. So the drills conducted near a busy air corridor have prompted both countries to enhance surveillance and collaboration with allies. So obviously China's ships there, getting photographs of those. Now, these incidents had happened on Friday and Saturday last week, and they've still been loitering as far as I understand it. China's unprecedented live fire naval drills in water in Australia and New Zealand raised significant security concerns, with analysts suggesting that Canberra and Wellington, the two capitals of Australia and New Zealand respectively, are likely to step up air and maritime surveillance capabilities to better monitor Chinese naval activities. Now, this really gets our navies in Australia and New Zealand actually doing stuff that they typically are supposed to train to do, right? Dealing with a military adversary. Obviously, China is the second biggest military in the world, so it's quite the beast, as it were. Both countries are also expected to invest in a wider range of intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance capabilities, including working with the United States and other partners. On Friday and Saturday, a Chinese Navy flotilla consisting of its most powerful warship, the Type 055 Renhai class cruiser, held 2 live fire exercises in the Tasman Sea, which prompted passenger planes to change course mid-flight and raised concerns amongst officials in both countries. Describing the drills as unprecedented, New Zealand's Defence Minister Judith Collins said on Monday that Wellington, that's the capital of New Zealand, had never seen a task force of this capability doing that kind of work. Now, we're going to talk about what that task force is, but we'll come up to that a bit later. The weapons that have extreme capability. This ship is full of extreme capability. One has 112 vertical launch cells, and has a reported anti-ship ballistic missile range of 540 nautical miles. So it's quite the beast of a military ship. On Saturday, Australia's Prime Minister Anthony Albanese said that even though the Chinese drills complied with international law, Beijing could have given more notice, and it's probably a fair call there. But of course, it's all part of giving short notice and getting it out there. Now, of course, Chinese officials will protest that, saying that they gave plenty of notice, but it is pretty scary. Now, typically 12 to 24 hours notice is given for such drills, but Collins said that Beijing only provided a couple of hours, and that, of course, is disputed from the Chinese officials. On Saturday, Australia's Foreign Minister Penny Wong requested an explanation from her Chinese counterpart. Of course, we saw Penny Wong in the video there with Chinese officials, counterpart Wang Yi, when the two met in Johannesburg on the sidelines of a G20 foreign ministers meeting. Now, Penny Wong is a pretty useless MP, but anyway, doing the job there at the moment, at least expressing some issue there, expressing that China's actions were in full compliance with international practices and did not affect aviation safety. China's Defence Ministry on Sunday accused Australia of hyping up the drills and deliberately exaggerating the situation. Now, it is a pretty unprecedented and unusual thing for the Chinese flotilla to be down in Tasman Sea between Australia and New Zealand, and the timing, of course, is pretty hilarious vis-a-vis the United States and, of course, President Trump's changing of world politics. Malcolm Davis, senior analyst at the Australian Australian Strategic Policy Institute said Canberra's response to the Chinese moves would be to set up air and maritime surveillance capabilities in the short term and increase Australian Defence Force operations to monitor Chinese activities. Now, New Zealand is definitely playing its role in monitoring with one of our frigates, and we're going to talk about that coming up. In the long term, we could see greater investments in a wide variety of intelligence and surveillance and reconnaissance. So that is what Australia is going to probably be looking to do. David said the Chinese deployment sparked real concern and intense debate in Australia because the manoeuvres came on the heels of Beijing's very aggressive actions in the South China Sea, with obviously that flare that was put out of the plane in front of an Australian plane there. On February the 11th, the Chinese PLA J-16 fighter jet released flares within 30 metres of the Royal Australian Air Force PAA Poseidon, which was conducting a routine surveillance patrol in international waters in the disputed waterway. That's the South China Seas. And that was from the Australian Defence Minister there. Describing Beijing's move over the weekend as strategic signalling, Davis said they also indicated willingness and capability to project naval capabilities against Australia at a time of its choosing. So there is a big deal here as well. He also noted that China's growing presence in the South Pacific, especially in the Cook Islands, boosted the perception that it might use the implicit threat of force to coerce states in the region. And of course, we're seeing that now they're as far down the South Pacific. They've been going from island to island, but now they're down as far as the South, as the Cook Islands. That's incredible. So we're going to talk about that in a minute. The Cook Islands announced on Saturday that it had struck a 5-year agreement with China to explore deep sea minerals, and it goes much beyond that. So we're going to talk about that. Troy Lee Brown, a research fellow at the University of Western Australia's Defence and Security Institute, said Australia's exercises in the Tasman Sea likely reflected a strategy to broaden and strengthen its naval presence and regional influence. They could also be aimed at stretching Australia's naval capacity. Australia regularly sends Royal Navy assets into the South China Sea, and the PLA Navy are likely returning the favour, and that's true too. It's probably will cause Australia and New Zealand decision makers to reflect on naval capability, but any action addressing concerns about capability would take years to roll out, and that's the problem, right? It takes years to adjust. If you've been asleep at the wheel, that is a big problem there. Now we've got a comment here, I think, coming in from Anita. Good to see Anita. Been like the Supermans there for sure. And we got Anita says they found a washed-up Chinese explosive on a Sydney beach this morning. Wow! So it just goes to show you, pretty crazy, right? That is so close, indeed. Now, what we got here? We got China was likely quite happy with New Zealand had taken notice. Miller said, given Wellington's increasingly pro-US and more hawkish positioning. Well, New Zealand's going to have its own problems with the Trump administration because Trump's on the right path and New Zealand's on a really bad path. So I'm going to do another video on New Zealand because New Zealand's going down the gurgler. We're going to become a third world country before we know it. It's terrible, all the things happening here. While the possibility of Wellington joining AUKUS Pillar 2 remain on the table, Beijing was perhaps keen to send a signal to Australia at the start of the US president's Donald Trump's administration. That's what I was saying, with all the stuff that President Trump's doing, which is, for the world's peace. China there still on its aggressive positioning now. So AUKUS, of course, is the arrangement between Australia and Australia, United Kingdom, and the US. It includes two main components. Pillar 1 involves providing Australia with nuclear-powered submarines, and of course, that won't be something that China likes. And while Pillar 2 focuses on collaboration and advanced technologies like quantum computing, artificial intelligence, and hypersonic weapons. Now, if you haven't checked out my show yesterday, I covered artificial intelligence, so definitely check that out. China previously described AUKUS as being driven by Cold War thinking, fueling military confrontation and creating additional nuclear proliferation risks, and had warned countries keen to join Pillar 2 amounted to taking sides. Now, China is obviously on an expansionary move. They're just waiting for the right time, right places to do it, particularly Taiwan. But if they take Taiwan, they'll have to do a lot more because they'll be pushed back, and therefore it will become a regional, if not a global war in that expansion, assuming the United States responds, which what we're expecting that to happen. Adding that the exercises were likely to harden New Zealand's resolve to increase defence spending. And now we're broke. In New Zealand, we're pretty broke. So if you're going to do that, where are you going to cut the money from? Because we've been spending a lot of money on a lot of wasteful things. So we'll see what happens here. The risk of constant escalation across the region, even when actions are fully permitted, international law is something is at some point a collision, accident, or other incident occurs which could trigger deep-seated ramifications and consequences potential to contribute to the outbreak of a wider conflict. Now, I really do think that China's going to be the one that does that wider outbreak. So that's where we are. Now, this is an article from Australia. Intelligence chief says Chinese warship deployment designed to be provocative. It is indeed. It's just absolutely bizarre that Chinese war flotilla would be this far down in Tasman Sea, just out of the blue. And so it definitely is, right? Now, obviously, they can do the argument that Australia's in the South China Seas, but they're doing normal naval operations there. So a bit of a tit for tat. And Australia doesn't go off doing, as far as I know, any live fire operations. So doing live fire, that's another level above there, and that's a very aggressive. So you can see there is a difference there, quantitative difference. So there is a picture of the ship there. Now we're just going to go through a couple of these comments here. One of Australia's most senior figures says aspects of China's deployment of 3 warships. There's 3 warships and maybe a submarine too. Tasman Sea appear designed to be provocative as the Naval Task Group continues to closely track heading towards to Tasmania. Director General of the Office of National Intelligence, Andrew Shearer, this week delivered a blunt assessment of Beijing's strategic aims for sending the heavily armed flotilla to the region. This thing was packed. These ships are super advanced, saying it was to shape the behavior of states like Australia, really trying to influence Australia vis-a-vis America. He also described its recent live-fire exercise as unprecedented and said they demonstrated China's growing capability to project military power into our immediate region and now matched by an increasing intent to do so. Of course, they do it with freedom of the seas availability there. Appearing before the Parliamentary Committee on Monday night, the ONI boss observed that this was the furthest south the People's Liberation Army Navy, called PLA-N, task group has operated. We judge Beijing's intends to normalize this sort of presence, shape the response of those in the region, and observe and learn from our reactions, told the Senate estimates hearing. The largest and least transparent military build-up since Second World War, and it will mean PLA will be able to operate at greater distances from mainland China in greater numbers, including Australia's immediate seas and skies. Now, remember, this flotilla had one of the ships was a fuel and supply ship to supply those 2 heavy warships that it has. So moving out there. On Tuesday, Defence confirmed that PLA-N flotilla had re-entered Australia's exclusive economic zone on Tuesday. So Friday, Saturday, it was doing those live fires. On Tuesday, back in the economic exclusive zone, where it had been closely tracked as it operated around 160 nautical miles east of Hobart. So that's Hobart there, and I think we've got that's all the way down here. So if you want to see Hobart, that's all the way down to Tasmania there as well. Now, Tasmania, pretty wild and beautiful place at the bottom of Australia there. One military figure not authorized to speak publicly told the ABC there was a working assumption that the task force, comprising 3 warships so far from the Chinese mainland for weeks, could have submarine support for at least part of the deployment there as well. Now, obviously, the China's nuclear capability in their ships is not as good as the Americans. So just remember that there are certain limits there. Other navies that boast nuclear power submarines, such as the United States and the United Kingdom, are known to regularly use them during lengthy and complex war missions because they've got nuclear power. They can just keep going all the time, whereas a lot of the Chinese ones are fueled. And that's why some people say that Chinese more of a coastal navy, but of course, here they are. They can deploy them further abroad with fuel supply ships. So, yeah, other navies. And meanwhile, commercial airline pilots who flew over the Tasman Sea last week have told ABC they monitored radio communications from the Chinese warships to military surveillance aircraft as far back as a week ago, warning about the possible live-fire activity. The Chinese vehicles made a broadcast on a 121 frequency about a live drilling, telling New Zealand aircraft to remain at a safe distance. One international airline told the ABC when describing a flight on Tuesday on February the 18th. The New Zealand aircraft replied that under international law, they can be there. It occurred a couple of times. Many civilian aircraft heard it and told the Chinese to go away. How about that's pretty funny. It looks like the civilian aircrafts are a bit more bold, than some of the politicians in New Zealand, Australia. This week, aviation officials revealed they were first informed that Chinese live-firing exercise had begun when a Virgin Australian pilot relayed warnings they had picked up mid-flight via an emergency radio signal there. So all drama in the skies and on the ocean there. Now, this is from New Zealand. So we've looked at one of the Chinese news. We've looked at one of the Australian news sites here. This is from New Zealand, from one of our propaganda ones, but we're going to use it for the time being. Seems to be reasonably factual for once. 3 Chinese ships in the Tasman Sea have moved into Australia's economic zone. defence officials here assuming the task force is backed by a nuclear-powered submarine. It comes as the Royal New Zealand Navy crews monitor the vessels release new photos of the fleet as the Chinese force edges closer to our neighbours' shores. Now, it's kind of cool that New Zealand actually has a ship here helping to monitor, plus some planes, which is kind of cool. The ships have been sailing international waters off Australia's east coast, conducting live fire since last week, causing Tasmanian flights, trans-Tasman flights between New Zealand and Australia to divert. The New Zealand Defence Force said that Chinese ships have moved towards the south of Tasmania and Australia's economic exclusive zone. It said the ships are now moving west. Obviously going down through here and probably going along through the Great Australian Bight here down the bottom of the ocean there. The Navy said it would be continuing to monitor the ships in close coordination with the Australian Defence Force using the Anzac frigate, the HMNS Te Kaha. So that means stand strong, Te Kaha there. I'm not sure why we don't have a frigate that has a Pakeha name on it. It's an English name, but hey, that's a story. That's another discussion. At the Maritime Sustainable vessel, the Aotearoa, another ship there. Don't know why that's not. That's should be called New Zealand or something. Hey, look, there's a lot of politics been going on in New Zealand hands trying to wipe out the Pakeha history in New Zealand. That is where we are at the moment. But it's good to see one of our frigates there getting involved. Yesterday, the New Zealand Defence Force said the ships were 218 nautical miles off Hobart in Tasman, and they were previously off the coast of Sydney. And so, if Anita was talking about that explosive coming there up on the coast in Sydney, that does seem to be a case. Wow, explosive! That's pretty crazy, right? I haven't seen an image of that, so I might look at that after the live stream. Last week, the Chinese military came into scrutiny for not warning Australia and New Zealand of drills being performed. And of course, the RNZ report the fleet consists of a Jinkai class frigate, the Hing Yang, and a Reinhei class cruiser, the Zunyi, and a Fuchi class replenishment vessel, the Wishanhu there. Hopefully I've said that reasonable justice. On Tuesday, the New Zealand Defence officials confirmed that the Chinese flotilla had re-entered Australia's economic exclusive zone, where it was being closely tracked as it operated around 160 nautical miles of Hobart. A military figure not authorised to speak told ABC there was a working assumption that the task force comprised 3 warships so far from the Chinese mainland, could have a submarine, and supports some pretty similar information what we've seen from the Australian and the Chinese side there. Other navies have boasted nuclear power submarines, and they typically use it, of course. Now, Defence Minister Judith Collins of New Zealand government didn't know if they intended to come closer to New Zealand, so we haven't seen that yet. So if they're coming down here from Australia, so if we go zoom out of here, coming from the Coral Sea down past Sydney here and then down past Hobart, are they going to loop back around and come back up through New Zealand, up through the west coast of New Zealand there? Well, that would be something, wouldn't it? That'd be something. I might get my little rocket launcher out. A little launcher look, all right. All right. We got what else did we got? Collins said she didn't think New Zealand had seen a live military exercise in the Tasman Sea that had affected flights. On Friday, she vented frustration at the Chinese government for not informing New Zealand it would be sending a highly capable strike force with enormous strike power down the east coast of Australia. Collins said the Chinese government and Chinese embassy had given New Zealand no notice. So this was intentional, right? So no notice. And so this was really a shot over the bow for Australia and New Zealand. And it was a strike force into the group there. So very, very planned. And we know the Chinese do a lot of this sort of aggressive stuff, just like planes almost hitting other planes, flares coming out of Chinese fighters. They're very aggressive, right? You could imagine if they actually did an invasion of our countries. Oh my God, the bloodbath it would be. They have not designed to advise, deemed to advise us on what they were doing in the middle of the Tasman. She said so. They haven't even told, what are you guys doing down there? Why can't you just do a live fire up in the South China Sea? China's defense minister hit back on Sunday saying the relevant remarks of the Australian side are completely inconsistent with facts, while confirming the use of live ammunition. Of course, the Chinese have not told them why they're there. But of course, we all know they're just there to intimidate peoples and test their ability to go out into the Pacific there. People's Liberation Army there. This is from a US site. Australia and New Zealand forces are tracking a Chinese surface action group operating off the island of Tasmania in Australia, exclusive economic zone. Both militaries announced this week. On Tuesday, the Australian Defence Department issued an update on the planned task group, comprising a group of cruisers there and a frigate and a fleet oiler there, which were both operating around the Tasman Sea. The formation, now this is some extra information here, dubbed Chinese Task Group 107. So that's the official designation there, was operating approximately 160 nautical miles east of Hobart inside the Australian's economic zone there, which they're allowed to do as long as they're peaceful. Defence continues to monitor the task group while it maintains in the vicinity of Australian maritime and is coordinated closely with the New Zealand Defence Force there. Obviously, that frigate of ours, the Te Kaha there, doing that. Now, I'm going to show you how big the respective militaries are, Australia, New Zealand, and China in a minute. So we'll have a quick look at that to see what we're up against. Now, we're going to scroll down here a little bit further and get into a little bit of the piece here, because this release stated that the personal Royal New Zealand Navy frigate Te Kaha reported observing. So the Te Kaha frigate was monitoring from distance the Chinese flotilla there, and of course observing the Zuni firing its main gun. So one of our frigates actually was doing some work and actually got to see the firing there. So they're actually tracking them just to make sure. I don't know what they're not coming to New Zealand. I don't know what they're going to do. I'm not sure. Frigate's got it's got some powerful weapons on it. These two frigates, but I'm not sure how they go clash to clash. That's for sure. Our Tuesday release provided the same location Australia's release, so we know that they're definitely down at the bottom there, around Tasmania, heading west. Meanwhile, and of course, while we've got this going off down in Tasmania, we've also got the US and Japan doing ballistic missile defense drill in Japan. So this is tying up the Japanese and American units as well. So if we go all the way back up here to Japan, we've got the Americans and the Japanese doing tests up here. I don't know, probably on the sea of Japan there somewhere as well. So pretty crazy stuff there. And of course, that is called Resilient Shield. Fleet activities there going on. So pretty good. It's providing a lot of forward defense projection there from the United States and Japanese as well. And it also has the commander of the US 7th Fleet. This exercise represents our teams with dynamic, realistic BMD scenarios meant to sharpen our reflexes and our defenses and provide an all-Dominion missile defense capability in the Indo-Pacific theater there. And they've got a number of heavy ships there, destroyers as well. So, and Missile Defense Command, they've got a lot of assets deployed there. The successful defense of the US and our allies from ballistic missile threats requires detailed planning. So that is what's going on there as well. So, and of course, that is, we've got the South China Seas down the bottom here for China, which they're very disputed area. Got the East China Seas up here, Taiwan in the middle, and then we've got the Japan at the top there. And as you guys know, Japan has given away their pacifist constitution and are now rearming because of the threat of China. China's made it very clear they want to be the number one superpower. But of course, that would be the case if Donald Trump wasn't running America and the Democrats were, which Democrats were pretty corrupt and managing the decline of America, helping China to get bigger as well. China getting bigger, wanting to be bigger. And of course, now with Trump, Trump is turning the US around and going to make it super powerful, right? Super powerful, the golden age. So now China's got some real big competition there as well. And so, yeah, that is pretty much it. So obviously the US strategy there is containment of China. China there, of course, with a very powerful, typically a coastal navy. But as we're seeing, if they want to, they've definitely got the assets to do forward positioning here all the way down. Can you believe it? At the bottom of the world there, doing some live fire, some pretty crazy stuff going on. So that is there from the US side there. Now, we did have a bit of extra stuff here from New Zealand. China's submarine claim hits back over Australia alert speed. And of course, Defence Minister Judith Collins, that's for New Zealand, has responded to claims the China Navy force group in the Tasman Sea may be accompanied by a submarine, I should say. I'm aware of suggestions that this task group has been accompanied by a nuclear submarine. While Chinese task groups do occasionally deploy submarines, not aware of the reports indicating that this is the case for a particular task group. The comments came as New Zealand Defence Force released new images of the warships off the coast of Australia. So we're going to check those out. And you can see some of those there. Look at that. Pretty badass. An Australian defence figure there told ABC that there was a working assumption that this task force is so far from the Chinese mainland could well have sub support. The Chinese warships groups has been monitored in recent days by, of course, our frigate, the Te Kaha, and include the frigate Hengyang there, and cruiser Zuni, and supply a vessel there, Wishanhu, Wishanhu, there from China there, which is that flotilla. Defence sources have confirmed that the Aotearoa ship is also supported there as well, and that's more of a logistics ship, a supply ship as I understand it. Takaho had been diverted from a mission in the Middle East to join the combined task force aiming to disrupt the illegal transfer of people, narcotics, and weaponry, or return to its original mission in the Arabian Gulf there. So that is what's going on there. Now, we have had people. We saw Wong from Australia go to talking with the Chinese officials. We also had our own foreign minister, who's the Deputy Prime Minister, Winston Peters from New Zealand, also go to China. He happened to be in that location anyway, going there. He says the minister is now traveling to Beijing, where he will undertake his 6th official visit to China. So the timing couldn't be perfect in that regard. His first was in 1997. He's been there many times, right through to 2018. He is pictured here in 1997. So you can see our foreign minister there, Winston Peters, the Deputy Prime Minister. And of course, he's the closest thing we have to kind of like a Trump, closest, although he doesn't do a lot of the stuff that he says he's going to do. So, yep. And then we have on the right-hand side here, of course, Chinese official there. So that is where we are there. Now, we're going to move up the top here. We've also got Winston Peters. The minister met with the head of, so this has just happened on the 25th. This is 2 days ago. The minister met with the head of the International Department for the Communist Party in Beijing today. Discussions focused on bilateral relations and sharing perspectives on regional global challenges. So this is latest stuff that he's been doing in China. Some of the communist parties there. You can see him in meetings. Let's scroll back up the top here. We're going to have a look at some other stuff that he's been doing. And 25th here as well, on 25th of February, the minister met with the Pacific ambassadors in Beijing. Now, this is very timely, of course, because of the deal between the Cook Islands, and we're going to talk about that next, and the Chinese. New Zealand Pacific ties run deep, and we're proud supporters of our Pacific partners in the region. And this is actually in China, which is kind of the big irony here as well. So all these different members from the Pacific countries in there as well. So that is coming up there. And then we've got some stuff here around education. They're doing stuff around education there as well. And the next one here is probably the big one. The minister met with the Chinese Vice President Han Jing in Beijing earlier today to discuss the important New Zealand-China bilateral relationship, including our strong trade ties and our people-to-people links and global issues of mutual interest. Obviously underplaying the Tasman issue there. And of course, let's see. He's fairly forthright, so we'll see whether he's got any more about that. So there we go. That is New Zealand there in China as at the moment. So pretty crazy stuff there, at least on the 25th of February. So we saw more of that. Now the other one, of course, we had they had an actual meeting with the Chinese foreign minister. So this is our foreign minister, Winston Peters, Deputy Prime Minister, having a meeting with the Chinese foreign minister, Wang Yi, in Beijing this evening. And there was a remarks there. We're going to close out of that. And then, of course, they actually had the meeting. This is on the 26th, I think it was. 1 hour. This is 1 hour ago. This is hot off the press. This has just happened. The minister has arrived in Mongolia and take the first visit here since 2013. And, of course, they're doing stuff in Mongolia there as well. So you can see that meeting, which is pretty crazy. So that is where we are at the moment. And this foreign minister meeting here, the ministers met China's Foreign Minister Yang Hui overnight, concluding a substantive visit to Beijing over the last 2 days. And of course, you would probably know the Chinese Foreign Minister there. And of course, that would have been talking about, no doubt, the Tasman live fire there from those ships. So pretty crazy times, right? Pretty crazy times. And there's a press release there on that. So we'll have a quick look at that and see what that comes up with. We're pleased to reconnect with the Foreign Minister, they say. Let's just zoom in on this. Let's have a look here, the New Zealand-China relationship. Talk about trade. Let me just jump through some of these. We also discussed strong relationship with Pacific countries. Let's see if they talked about this issue in the Tasman. So nothing, I can't see anything in there about the Tasman there. So pretty weak comment there. So obviously doing the talking behind the scenes seems to be the case there. Now, we did see some countenance here. Some people saying, well, this move is probably too aggressive from China. And of course, they're calling it a Chinese own goal. In other words, they sort of do themselves in by doing this sort of display coming out down to Tasman. How war games in Tasman Sea could push New Zealand closer to AUKUS. Of course, that's Australia, the UK, and US with the submarines, and of course the phase 1, Pillar 1 and Pillar 2 expansion. And so, that could end up backfiring on them and pushing us towards the US even more, and Australia and AUKUS, which is, we don't really have the money, but I mean, if it's that could be the case there. So that is where all the drama is at the moment. in the South China Sea. So it doesn't all happen just between the United States and other countries up here in Asia. We're getting the drama down in Australia and New Zealand. And of course, that big ocean of ours is not really protecting us from this kind of drama, right? And of course, it has ramifications for the world, one would say. Now we've got Marco in the house there. When did you change your handle? About 3 days ago, Marco, about 3 days ago. All right. Good to see you, Marco. I hope you're doing well out there. And yeah, that's kind of where we are at the moment on here. Australia, New Zealand, at the bottom of the world, not so much of, not so well defended when you got that ability for flotilla to just come down and do some live fire there going around Australia at the moment. All right. So now that wasn't the only drama. So obviously Australia and New Zealand under a bit of intimidation there from the Chinese flotilla. But what else are we seeing? We're seeing, look at, I just want to bring back to where China is all the way up here. And of course, the Pacific out here, going all the way down. They've been doing lots of weird behaviors with a lot of islands in the Pacific over the years. But now they are all the way down here. Look at it, all the way down to the Cook Islands. So this is our second issue that we're going to talk about here. Cook Islands, China shock, a frog in the pond moment for Pacific security there. Sorry, a frog in the pot moment for Pacific security. And of course, the new China Cook Islands deal has implications for Pacific security, but particularly for New Zealand, the United States, and Australia. And of course, this is a big, big problem, right? So this has definitely been an issue. And of course, we're going to talk about that. So let's go to the next article. Cook Islands Prime Minister faces no confidence vote. So because of this deal, the politicians in Cook Islands trying to get a no confidence votes on the Prime Minister, that has failed. So the Prime Minister got away with it, and so that has not happened. He is free. He is free. So he avoided that very, very, very cleverly there. Now, of course, in the Cook Islands here, that is going to be very, very bad because that's going to establish the Chinese here. Now they're going to be looking for minerals off the coast in the deal, but they've also got a bigger deal for potentially ports and things like that. And we know that the Chinese typically use commercial ports as de facto military bases and expansion. And so that's pretty scary from Cook Islands down through to New Zealand. You can see they have island access there, and also to Australia. Also being able to project power from the Cook Islands potentially up into Hawaii, right? And of course, with all sorts of potential there, and of course, even potentially, I guess, as a stopover to the United States there. And of course, that's why Trump decided to shut down. You know, he wants to close down the Panama Canal down here because the Chinese were taking over that, right? And so he was trying to get that fixed up, right, with the Panama Canal. In here, so that is something that Trump was trying to shut down, was controlled by China here, because obviously if they control that, they also are on the doorstep, of course, of the Gulf of America, and of course getting access through here through Panama into the US, right? So that is just another pincer movement, one pincer movement by another, giving it more forward access to the United States. So that is pretty serious stuff there. Now, how big is the military? Of course, China's military obviously is huge. We can see here China versus Australia. Now, a defense budget in Australia and in China is about $230 billion or more US. In Australia, it's $42 billion, which is not too bad, but quite a bit smaller than China. Remember, the United States is the number one country with about $880 billion of budgets, defense spending there, which is pretty crazy. Now, obviously, China has lots of tanks and things like that, but they're no good unless you can transport them in big logistical ships, which, of course, China does have some. But, of course, China has a lot of military there, 1,200 fighter jets, and they've just added 500 Mighty Dragon J-20 jets there as well. Obviously, they have a huge army, having the second biggest population in the world, 3.3 million people in their army there. Rocket projections. Now, this is not so bad because it's obviously land-based and more in the South China Sea. China has 2,250 rocket projectors, and these also include supersonics, right? They have supersonic projectors, and that makes them very dangerous against U.S. aircraft carriers. Australia has none, of course. And, of course, the population of China, they're pretty big, 1.4 billion. So there we go. Very, very big. Now, obviously, China there has got technically the biggest navy. We're going to talk about that, but it's not as advanced as a lot of the US Navy. So there is definitely gaps there, particularly nuclear powered aircraft carriers. Now, at the moment, China's got, I think, the third aircraft carrier finishing its testing, and it's got a fourth aircraft carrier under design, which is going to be, I think, its first nuclear-powered aircraft carrier. That's a big deal. There's definitely trying to expand. Now, compare that to the United States, which has 11 aircraft carrier fleets, and many of those are operating around the world at one particular time. It just goes to show Australia is really trying to expand there. And I think once it got to at least 4 aircraft carriers, it'd be very powerful. But really, they're coastal at the moment. Those 3 aircraft carriers, very much coastal projection of power. They can take fuel ships along with them, like we're seeing with this flotilla. But really, until they get a nuclear-powered one, that is going to limit them to some degree. And of course, they're adding other technologies on top of those aircraft carriers as well, like electrics and things like that. Electric takeoffs. So we got tanks here. Australia has ordered 4.6 billion new M1 Abrams. So obviously it needs that for a lot of land protection. So it's got 59 there. And of course, China has 3,200 tanks, right? But of course, the Abrams there are probably a lot better than some of the Chinese ones, as far as I know, as well. Fighter jets. Obviously, there's 1,200 fighter jets in China, approximately, but fighter jets in Australia about 75. Now, China has, Australia has, advanced, F-35, as far as I know. Also has American assets in China and in Australia as well. So it's not just Australian stuff there. Has 80,000 people in the military personnel. Compare that to 3.3 million in China. Of course, the Chinese military would have to get to Australia. And of course, that would require ships, which they do have some decent amount of ships to do that. And of course, Australia there, submarines. Australia has 6, China has 79 submarines. So whether that flotilla's got one of these, we don't know. Building 12 new submarines in Adelaide as part of AUKUS. So that AUKUS alliance, very, very big deal there. And of course, there'll be nuclear submarines rather than diesel ones, right? So that's very important there for expansion. And Australia population of 25 million versus China's 1.4 million. Of course, in Australia, that's where they live. So it's got an advantage there from that point of view. But Australia is huge, right? Huge area to protect. Now, we're going to have a quick look at New Zealand. New Zealand does hardly anything. We're broke. We've got bad leadership. We've had bad leadership for decades. They're all traitors, but this is the way it goes. Not much I can do about it. We've got Te Kaha there. That's a frigate. That's the one that is observing the Chinese flotilla. And then we've got the Tamana there. That's another one there. Where's the Pakeha name for a fighting ship? I don't know. We've got a lot of racism going on in New Zealand against the Pakeha, the majority. And just the way it goes. In fact, all Maori are basically Pakehas as well. We've got the Atara. I guess it's a mute point then. We've got the Aotearoa one as well. Another invented name from the middle of the 19th century. And then we've got the Canterbury. So we're finally getting to some Pakeha names. Canterbury name there as well. The Wellington and the Otago. We've got some coastal ships there as well. So that's all we've got in terms of defense there. And this boat here and this one here observing that Chinese flotilla along with the Australians and some planes. Now, that is the military there. So you can see China is very, very powerful. Now, obviously, in Australia, we do have some combination between US facilities. So I think US only has one Navy base in Australia, but does have a lot of shared bases that it uses. And you can see that represented in this activist map here as well. So it's training bases and, of course, some aircrafts and things like that. And particularly the north, right? That's normally where you think about defending from, because that's your forward position towards the Chinese. So that is kind of where we are at the moment on all that. So that is a coverage there on the shocking truth about Chinese Navy's live fire in the Tasman Sea. Australia and New Zealand definitely panicked a bit, but then they sort of calmed down and said, well, there's not much we can do about it. And let's just leave it at that. They probably had some soft words with the Chinese counterparts, both Wong and Peters. They're the 2 foreign ministers. And that's about it. All right, hope you guys have enjoyed that coverage. That's 48 minutes on the hour. Don't forget to subscribe, like, share, hit the bell. If you love this coverage, leave your comments. And of course, just like Anita said, Chinese explosives showing up on Sydney Beach. There's pretty crazy stuff happening that we haven't seen before. All right, I hope you guys enjoyed, everybody, and I'll see you in the next show. Take care, everybody, and bye for now.